There is a chemical in your sweat that changes the moment you start falling apart. You can't smell it. You can't see it. You have no idea it's there. But if there's a dog anywhere near you right now, it has been reading that chemical since the second you walked into the room. Not guessing, not sensing a vibe, reading. The chemical is cortisol, your primary stress hormone. When something devastating happens, when you get news that changes everything, when grief hits before you've had time to understand it, when something cracks open inside you for a reason you couldn't even explain, cortisol floods your bloodstream and exits through your sweat in concentrations that are completely invisible to you. To a dog, it's a flashing red light. A dog's nose contains around 300 million olfactory receptors. Humans have about 6 million. The portion of their brain dedicated entirely to analyzing scent is, proportionally, 40 times larger than ours. This isn't a minor difference. It's a completely different category of perception. Dogs can detect cancer cells in human tissue. They can smell a shift in blood sugar before a diabetic goes into a seizure. They can track a single person's scent trail through an entire city days after that person walked through it. So when you're devastated before you've said a word, before you've cried, before you've even fully understood what's happening, your dog already knows. The question that comes after that is the one nobody can fully answer. Because detecting something and actually caring about it are two very different things. In 2012, researchers at the University of London designed a study specifically to test what dogs do when a human is in emotional distress. The setup was straightforward. In a room, people either cried, hummed, or spoke completely normally. The dogs hadn't been trained. Nobody told them what to do. They just lived in the space while these things happened around them. When people cried, nearly every dog in the study approached them. Not their own owner, specifically any crying human. They moved toward the person, made physical contact, and oriented their body toward the source of the distress. When people hummed, also an unusual sound that might attract a dog's curiosity, the dogs went over to investigate. But it was different, noticeably different. The critical detail was what the dogs looked like when they approached. Head low, tail low, slow, deliberate movement. Behavioral scientists have a specific phrase for this cluster of signals. Empathic response. Not excitement. Not confusion. Not a dog that found something interesting and went to check it out. A dog that appeared, behaviorally, to be responding to pain. And here's the part that's hardest to reason away. They did it with strangers. People they had never met, with no shared history, no learned patterns to follow. Just a human in distress and a dog that decided to cross the room. There's a version of this story that's less impressive than it sounds. Dogs are extraordinary observers. Over years of living with you, they catalogue thousands of microsignals, the shift in your breathing, the change in your voice, the way your posture collapses slightly when something is wrong. Maybe they don't feel anything at all. Maybe they've simply learned that specific signals predict specific outcomes, and they follow the sequence because it reliably produces a reward. You're sad, they come over, you soften, you're quieter, things calm down. That's the skeptic's argument, and it's a fair one. But it doesn't explain the strangers. And it especially doesn't explain horses. In 2018, researchers at the University of Sussex showed horses photographs of human faces. One image, happy. One image, angry. Then they played audio recordings of a human voice deliberately mismatched. A warm, happy voice paired with an angry face. A sharp, threatening voice with a smiling one. The horses reacted. Heart rate elevated. They turned to view the mismatched image specifically with their left eye, a response associated in horses with processing negative or threatening information. They didn't just register a face. They cross-referenced it against the vocal tone they were hearing in real time. They noticed the contradiction. Something didn't add up, and they knew it. Horses have lived alongside humans for approximately 6,000 years, long enough that some researchers believe they've developed a form of emotional literacy that's specific to us, not just reading other horses, but reading humans the way they'd read a herd member. Mapping our expressions, cross-checking our signals, building an internal model of how human emotion behaves and what it means when it doesn't add up. That's not a simple conditioned response. That requires the horse to have constructed, somewhere in its processing, a working model of human emotional logic. Cats are a different problem, and in some ways a more interesting one. The standard narrative is that cats don't care, and there's behavioral truth to it. Cats didn't evolve in packs. They don't carry the same social wiring that dogs do. They are not going to sprint across a room to sit with a stranger who's crying. But a 2015 study from Oakland University found something that quietly complicates that entire reputation. Researchers had cat owners display either positive or negative emotions, smiling, looking visibly distressed while either the owner or a stranger was present in the room. The cats weren't performing for anyone, they were just existing in the space while these emotional signals were present. When the owner smiled, cats spent more time near them, more purring, more active engagement. When the owner looked distressed, the cats changed. They pulled back from active interaction, but they moved closer physically. They stayed in proximity, quieter, more still. With strangers displaying the exact same emotions, the effect was significantly weaker. The cats weren't responding to sadness as a general category. They were responding to their person's sadness, not human emotion in the abstract. This human, this emotion, right now. That's not indifference. That's a specific relationship, doing something specific. And then there are elephants, where all the comfortable distance between instinct and something harder to name begins to break down. When a member of an elephant herd is distressed, injured, frightened, grieving, the response from those around them is immediate and consistent across every observation. They rumble softly. They approach. They use their trunks to touch the distressed animal's face and mouth. They position their bodies around them like a barrier, and they stay. In 2014, a research team in Thailand documented this behavior in systematic observation over an extended period. The response was consistent across different ages, different relationships, and different levels of familiarity. But the finding that's hardest to explain away was this. It came from calves, too. Young elephants with no accumulated life experience that could have taught them this behavior were doing the same thing the adults did, the same approach, the same touch, the same staying. You can't make a learned behavior argument about a baby elephant that has never experienced enough of anything to have learned it. Something in them already knew, before any experience reinforced it, before any outcome could have been associated with it. Some form of the understanding that when something is in pain, you go toward it, not away, appears to be built into certain animals at a level that predates experience entirely, which forces a question that evolutionary theory actually has to answer. Because caring about someone else's pain is expensive. It costs time. It exposes you to potential danger. It redirects your energy from your own survival towards something that has no direct benefit to you. From a purely mechanical standpoint, the most efficient organism is the one that doesn't get distracted by another organism's suffering. But social animals don't survive as individuals. A herd that fails to detect distress in its own members collapses at the first real threat. A pack that ignores what's happening to one of its own loses the members it depends on. A group where individuals consistently move away from suffering where they stop registering it loses the connective tissue that holds it together. Emotional sensitivity is infrastructure, the ability to detect pain in others, to move toward it, to stay. That's not softness. That's a survival system. And over millions of years, for the species that carried it, it became so deeply embedded that it started appearing in calves before they had any reason to learn it. It became, in some sense, the default. But here's what none of that infrastructure theory tells us. It doesn't tell us what it's like to be the dog that's crossed the room and put its head in your lap. We can measure cortisol. We can document behavioral responses. We can run controlled studies that prove animals treat sadness differently from every other stimulus. What we cannot do is climb inside the experience and find out whether anything is happening there that resembles what you feel when someone you love is hurting. Some researchers think that question is unanswerable by design, that we're mapping human experience onto creatures whose inner world, if they have one, is simply too different to compare. Others think the refusal to even ask it is its own bias, an assumption that something like genuine feeling, something like actual care, belongs exclusively to us. That the same evolved hardware producing these behaviors couldn't possibly be running anything that looks like empathy from the inside. The honest answer is that nobody knows. And the fact that nobody knows is not the same as the answer being no. Here's what the science does tell us. Before you showed a single visible sign, something in that dog registered what was happening to you. It moved toward you. It made contact. It stayed. Whether that required anything on the inside that resembles what you feel when someone you love is in pain, we cannot say. But here's what evolution tells us. The instinct to move toward suffering rather than away from it has been tested across millions of years against every possible competing strategy. It survived in dogs. It survived in elephants, in horses, in cats. In species we're only beginning to study properly. Every time it went up against indifference, against self-preservation, against the simpler strategy of just walking away, it won. It kept getting selected for, passed down, reinforced, until it became automatic, until baby elephants were doing it before anyone taught them, until dogs were crossing rooms for strangers they'd never met. Whether it requires anything like feeling from the inside, we still don't know. But it decided, across every species that ever carried it, across every generation that ever passed it forward, that you were worth staying for. And it's still here, sitting right next to you.